Welcome to r/Prorevenge, where employees get revenge against their terrible boss. So, my fiancée at the time, now wife, were driving around looking for dresses for her bridesmaids to wear for the wedding. We'd been going from place to place looking for something she liked, but no luck. We had just finished leaving David's bridal and were leaving the plaza. It had been raining a lot, so the roads were slick. As I reached the intersection of where the plaza met the road to turn out, another car came turning in. Unfortunately, he didn't brake soon enough and skidded into the front end of the driver's side. Thankfully, everyone was okay. We got out of our cars and looked at the damage. His car, of course, was completely unharmed, and mine had a minor dent. He looked about 45-ish and had his son in the car with him. We exchanged names and phone numbers. He let me know he was on the way to work, and I told him we were just wedding shopping. I was 22 at the time and very naive as to what to do in case of an accident. He told me that we both seemed pretty busy and that we should just handle it ourselves since we were both busy. We didn't call the police, my mistake, and he told me to get the damage looked at to see what it would cost. I took the car in 2 days later and they quoted me $1,100 for the bumper to be replaced. I texted him and he told me he'll be getting scholarships in 2 months when he goes back to school and he'd be able to pay me in cash then. I, again, naively told him that'd be fine. A week later, I followed up with him about another estimate I got, which was lower than the original $900, but I got no response. I texted him again and again for the next few days, and nothing. At this point, I realized he'd bailed. I came up with a plan to find him. All I had was his name, a now useless phone number, and a general idea of where he worked. I searched for him on Facebook and was pretty sure I found him. I searched under his family members and saw what looked to be his son. My soon-to-be sister-in-law was 16 and looked about the same age as his son. I decided to go full-on sleuth and go undercover. I used her Facebook and changed her last name to match theirs. I then messaged the son and told him that I thought we might be cousins. I asked him some questions about his dad, like his name and his job, and told him that my mom said I have an uncle down there by that name and worked at his guitar shop. He answered yes, that was his dad's name, and told me the name of the place where his dad worked. I was so relieved I was making progress. The next day, I drove back up near the accident and found where the man worked. I found his car and took pictures of the license plate. I then took all the info I had and went to the courthouse. I filled out paperwork and handed it to the clerk. The clerk told me they could either mail the form to his work address, or if I paid $25, I could have an officer hand deliver it. Of course, I paid the $25 just to embarrass him at his place of work. A few weeks later, we were summoned to court to see if we could work things out before going to an actual hearing. He showed up and we sat down with a mediator. She explained everything to all of us. I told him I didn't want to do this, but he stopped responding. He replied that his phone was stolen, so he had to get a new one. In my mind, a phone being stolen doesn't equal changing your phone number. I knew he was lying. The moderator asked him to step outside. She talked to us and told us not to trust him because his story didn't make sense. The mediator invited him back inside and we read over the terms I listed in the court documents. He was to pay $2,400. I charged him the original replacement cost, gas from driving back and forth, my time for doing all this work, and extra for being a butthole. He said he would pay, but didn't like that I went to his work and took pictures of his car. I replied that I didn't like he hit my car. A few months later, he paid the full amount in cash and had to pay for our court costs as well. I sold the damaged car and took the cash he gave me to buy another car fully in cash. All in all, I benefited from it, but next time, I'll just call the cops and save myself the headache. Our next Reddit post is from The System Sucked. I've had a long, respectable career in game development. A couple of years ago, I've abandoned it for a cushy corporate job, and now spend most of my days missing game dev. This story takes place about 10 years ago at the apex of my career. I was the lead on a AAA project. Our parent company, for which video games was just one of its many lines of business, was going through changes. We had to move offices 3 times in 1 year. Second of the 3 moves, always intended to be temporary, put us in the basement of an older building long occupied by satellite departments not involved with development. The basement we were given had been empty for years, save for the most distant office. You entered the basement through a dimly lit staircase. Then, after you snake through a horror movie-like maze of corridors and interconnected small rooms, you'd eventually arrive at the farthest room of all. A golden plaque was on the door. Trademark Compliance Department. Literally no one I knew was ever aware of trademark compliance, even though trademarks were a pretty important part of everything we did. The department consisted of a single elderly trademark attorney and his fresh-faced college grad assistant slash paralegal slash whatever. The lawyer flipped his frickin' lid when he learned people were being moved into his basement. For a couple of weeks, he tried desperately to prevent the move, getting all the way to the CEO. The tiny, leathery lawyer amazed everyone with his deep, booming voice that would climb and climb and climb in pitch as he yelled and screamed and threatened. So, all his efforts being for naught, our stuff was moved into the basement over one weekend. We spent the following Monday and Tuesday dealing with all sorts of setup woes: electrical outlets, network connections, breathable air. On Wednesday, two quiet 2D artists came into their L-shaped room, the one with a fancy door to trademark compliance, and found that all their stuff, chairs, desks, computers, everything was pushed into the far corner. A walkway of caution tape was set up leading to the compliance door. While we were trying to figure out what the heck happened, a demigod VP, as close to the company's CEO as it gets, walked into our lowly basement trailed by the beaming lawyer. Apparently, our desk blocked his door. He even had pictures. The demigod hadn't seen them prior to walking down. Once he saw dozens and dozens of close-ups of the desk corner, the VP's face grew less certain. Our desk was blocking his doorway by less than an inch on the side with the hinges. The door opened away from the desk. I'm guessing, even when open at 90 degrees, the edge of the desk was about as wide as the protruding part of the desk. In other words, it was technically blocking the doorway, but no more so than the door itself. Non-committal as always, the demigod instructed us to make sure all pathways were clear at all times, and that he expected this would be the last time he had to get involved. I'm generally a people pleaser. I can even maybe sympathize with an old guy freaking out when a gaggle of man-children in ironic t-shirts wreck his long-established way of life. I figured it was time to modify the seating chart. Two people would be a pretty tight fit for that weird room, and I also didn't want my quiet flower child artist anywhere near that loon. I apologized to the lawyer and told him I was moving two people out and moving just one person in, making sure it was as uncluttered as possible. I had two potential candidates in mind, and while leaning strongly towards one, I considered a milder option in case the lawyer turned out to be an alright guy after all. The lawyer answered my apology with a triumphant, "Serves you right," and "That's what you get for messing with adults," and "Welcome to the real world," and "This is far from over." He then ordered me to wait right here and came out with a tape measure. We snaked through his entire path from the staircase to his office, measuring his clearance from desks and chairs and people's items, and the lawyer booped desks and monitors and garbage cans and pushed people sitting in their chairs as if they were garbage cans. He crawled on the floor and marked out no man's land in chalk. No one was ever allowed to block his pathway, or he'd have everyone's jobs. Once all the lines were drawn and the lawyer retreated to his fortress of smugness, I knew our slightly unhinged physics programmer with his anime posters and the loud clink of his mechanical keyboard would not be moving into the room after all. My revenge was going pro. Now, the issue of sound was discussed more than any other as we were planning the temporary move. Our sound designer had to listen to all sorts of sounds at full volume on different types of speakers, not just on his headphones. If sound was designed on headphones and you played it on surround speakers, you'd sense it. Our old office had a professionally soundproofed room. Even then, that was a pretty unpleasant thing. Huge sounds couldn't be heard, but could be felt. Like an inaudible earthquake, it struck you with primal dread. So we discussed this on and on and on. I wanted a soundproof room. Management wanted headphones. We eventually agreed on a compromise. We just have to accept screams and explosions on speakers while we were in the basement. This decision had also been approved by the same VP about a month before the walkway and chalk incident. You already see where I'm going with this. We made the walkway semi-permanent with construction tape. I took pictures and sent an update email to everyone reporting that A, we pledged to keep all pathways clear at all times, and B, the offending girl would have the two girls move out and only the sound designer move in. The VP replied with, "Thank you, that's great." See how the email listed the sound designer in an offhand way? This was not my first rodeo. We moved the sound designer and all his equipment into the room. The next morning, explosions started, then stopped. High-pitched screams were heard in the distance. Footsteps. My door flew open and the lawyer ran in screaming, "What the F?" He dragged me across the street to the VP's office. The VP wasn't there. The lawyer screamed and jumped and stomped his little feet, left voicemails, then retreated to write an email to the VP with a CC list possibly going all the way up to President Obama and the Lord Commander of the Night's Watch. I quickly replied that 1. Sound design issues had been extensively discussed and were deemed a necessary evil. 2. I notified everyone before the fact that the sound designer was moving into that particular room. And 3. If I had to keep moving people around every day, I wouldn't be able to hit my milestones. The VP replied the next morning saying, he's right about milestones, besides, it's temporary anyway. And so, for the next 7 months, the compliance department was subjected to 8 hours a day of non-stop explosions, gunfire, screams, grunts, engine roar, and wet thuds. Once released, our game's sound was singled out for praise in multiple reviews. I put the lawyer's name somewhere in the midst of the thank you section in the credits. Our next Reddit post is from Mowixa. I took the final for an engineering class this morning. Usually, 1 or 2 people will go to the bathroom during class. However, for totally unknown reasons, about half of the class needed to use the restroom during the exam. Obviously, a vast majority of them were looking up the answers on their phones. This irritated me, but I just stayed focused and barely finished since it was a hard exam. I remember that there was one particular problem that was only barely related to the stuff we went over in class, where part A was fairly easy, but I had no idea how to do part B. I didn't fret over it too much though, since that part was only 5 points out of 100. Well, our professor, who's on the older side, and I would have thought was somewhat ignorant of technology, sent us an email just now explaining his diabolical plan to catch cheaters. Many of the students in this class use Chegg, a website that has answers to lots of homework questions if you're not familiar. To be fair, I have an account too, though I only use it for studying and checking homework solutions. Anyway, he explained that he was tired of people going to the bathroom and looking up answers on their phones, so he made the question I mentioned earlier as a trap. He purposefully made part B impossible to solve, and about a month before the final, he got a TA with a Chegg account to ask the exact question, which was distinctly worded to be unique. He then created his own Chegg account and answered the question with a BS solution that seems right at first glance, but is actually fundamentally flawed, and very unlikely that someone would make the same assumptions and mistakes independently. He said that out of 99 exams, 14 of them fell for the trap, and that everyone who had this wrong solution on their exam was given a 0, and reported to the university for violating the academic honor pledge they signed on the front. He also sent an email to all the other professors in our department giving them the list of cheaters. Then, we have a similar story from Ruff Sauce. I witnessed an incident once following a lab practical exam. Earlier that year, the professor had mentioned that the exams stay roughly the same each year, which is why we aren't allowed to keep our graded practical sheets after learning of our scores. In the class following the exam, the professor took us in one by one to walk through our answers and get feedback on what we need to study. It went relatively quick, with the exception of 3 to 4 students who walked out the back room looking totally white in the face. Turns out, this small group of students had tracked down a TA from last year and pooled money to buy the answer key from the TA. What they didn't know is that any TA who has worked with that professor is on a scheme to catch cheaters, so they essentially revealed themselves even prior to taking the exam. Accordingly, the professor wrote 4 entirely new and unique exams, only for those students who he was made aware of were trying to cheat. Needless to say, they failed the exams, were outed, and faced pretty gnarly academic punishment as a result. The reason for him writing 4 unique separate exams was he could tell who actually ended up trying to memorize and utilize the answer key. Of the 4 involved, only one of them remained in the class after that day, so I'm guessing he was the only one who had the brains to realize how stupid cheating that way was. He did, however, only score like a 65%. The professor made those 4 exams inordinately difficult, and it tanked his grade, so he did face some sort of fallout from the whole thing. Our next Reddit post is from Melindy. This is a lengthy story that happened to me, a woman, around 6 years ago. I applied for a job as a bar manager at a new resto bar that opened up in my area, Ontario, Canada. The owner of this bar had some issues with her liquor license being revoked at a previous establishment, and there was some sort of stipulation, this part I'm not clear on, where she was required to 1. Not be on site or involved in the business in any capacity for any reason. She was a prohibited person, and I believe she made her husband the owner on paper, but for this story she's referred to as the owner. 2. Hire a manager with over 5 5 years of experience and a Smart Serve certificate to run and be responsible for the bar. Both of these were required in order to get another liquor license. After a short interview process, I was offered the job and was told of these terms. I accepted them despite already apparent red flags. I was a very poor student. When the restaurant/bar opened, everything quickly fell apart. Despite the owner not being allowed to be on premises, she proceeded to micromanage both the kitchen and the front of the house. She stopped scheduling kitchen staff to save money and was working in the kitchen herself. Food quality plummeted, customers became irate at how long of a wait it was, and word quickly spread in this small town. Eventually, a select few regulars became our only customers. More hours got cut. Waitresses and kitchen staff were let go. The owner was now drinking at the bar and at the same time was waitressing and cooking. This was all in the matter of a month. One night that month, it was exceptionally nice out and we had a lot of boaters in the area. We had a pier near the bar where boats could dock and walk into the restaurant. A large group had walked in on this night and they were both very clearly underage and very clearly over intoxicated. I immediately cut them off, to which they made a very large stink about it, enough that the owner's husband came over to ask what happened. I explained that I'd cut the group off and wasn't going to serve them, to which the owner's husband decided to take their drink orders and serve them anyways. Obviously, money was tight, so they didn't care about the rules. The next day, the owner pulled me into the office and accused me of stealing $50 out of the till the night previous. I knew this to be a lie that could be easily disproven because there's a camera located directly above the till that is synced to the time code on the POS. I was fired on the spot. I 100% believe this was because I was refusing to serve customers and thereby damaging their bottom line. I was really miffed to be accused of doing something I didn't do, and more upset that she used this lie she made up as an excuse to fire me. Because the stipulation of her having her liquor license was me working at the bar as manager, I emailed the liquor control board when I got home and informed them of the rules being broken at the bar. A liquor inspector came to meet me later that week and took a statement. He then paid a surprise visit to the bar and was able to witness all the other things that I informed him of, including the owner both being on site and being involved in the business, serving minors and serving intoxicated persons. The liquor inspector slapped them with a very large fine, north of $50,000. Their liquor license was suspended, and the owner was too broke to pay the fine and was forced to close the restaurant. I received death threats from her for a while after that, but the revenge was absolutely worth it. OP, you should report those death threats too, and hopefully we can land her in jail. That was rSlash_Prorevenge, and if you like this video and want to see more, hit that subscribe button, because I put out new Reddit content every single day.